Good evening, friends. You've stumbled upon the Disenfranchised podcast. That podcast all about those franchises of one, the films that fancy themselves full-fledged franchises before falling flat on their face after the first film. I am your host, Stephen Foxworthy, joined tonight by absolutely no one, because life, my friends, finds a way. It always finds a way, and it found a way for us twice in the last 3 weeks. So unfortunately, it has fallen to me to let you know that our regularly scheduled episode, which was supposed to be 2008's Hancock, has been postponed. We will get to it eventually. I don't know when, but we will get back to Hancock at some point. Instead, we are subbing in the third episode of our third annual Spooky-thon from October of 2022, our episode on Will Smith's I Am Legend, as a continuation of our Gettin Jiggy in July series that we've put together for you. It's a movie literally that releases right before Hancock, so a lot of the context of his career is going to be very much the same. And then we'll pick up next week with the next entry that we are prepared to discuss. Hopefully, life will have found its way out by that time, and we'll be able to continue. We're joined in this episode by our good friend James McCormick from the cast of Cthulhu. Please make sure to check out all of his socials. Everything will be in the show notes, the description for this episode. But yeah, show him some love. Show the cast of Cthulhu some love. They're great guys, and they absolutely deserve it. But join us for this fun conversation, and join us again next week when we'll be back with a brand new episode of Disenfranchised. So this is me, your host, Stephen Foxworthy, saying until next time, just get jiggy with yourself for a while. Stephen Foxworthy. I'm a podcaster living in Indianapolis, Indiana. This is the Disenfranchised Podcast, a podcast about franchises of one, films that fancy themselves full-fledged franchises before falling flat on their face after the first film. We provide entertainment. We provide knowledge. When we are here to tell you all about movies. Again, my name is Stephen Foxworthy. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Brett Wright, the man for whom three little birds told every little thing was going to be all right. How we doing, Brett?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Listen to the birds, Brett. Listen to the birds.
Nah, I'm all right. Birds are terrifying. Doc taught me that. Birds
aren't real. Brett, if the internet's told me anything, it's told me that birds aren't real.
Right. They are also spies for the CIA, correct?
Correct. Right. Yep. And little drones with cameras in their faces. Yep, that's again. This is the thing that I know. I also know that, Brett, we are not alone today. We are joined by a survivor in New York City from the cast of Cthulhu. It's our good friend. Welcome back, Mr. James McCormick. James, how are you, sir?
I'm good. It's good to survive. It's I'm just with my cat right now. My girlfriend is gone, and it's weird right now. But I got coffee. I got liquor. I'm okay.
I was gonna say you got everything you need, yes. Really. You don't have a dog. You've got a cat, but you've got coffee. You've got liquor. Just save the bacon. As long as you're saving the bacon.
I mean, the only difference is if I had a dog, he'd try to help me. With the cat, if I'm dying, he'll just look at me and then wait till I die and eat me. So it's okay.
Honestly, I've got two dogs, and I don't know to what extent they'd be much use helping me. Honestly. But I love them to death. They are good dogs. Boy, howdy, a tough scene to watch. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Spooky-thon, week 3 of our annual Spooky-thon, our third annual Spooky-thon. And we are coming at you with a very interesting type of horror movie. Brett, what movie are we covering today?
We're covering I Am Legend.
I Am Legend from 2007. Directed by Francis Lawrence, based on a screenplay by Mark Protasevich and Akiva Goldsman, based on the novel by Richard Matheson, and starring Will Smith, Alice Braga, Charlie Tahan, Sally Richardson Whitfield, Willow Smith, Daryl Foster, and just a ton of below-the-line cast members. What a cast, gentlemen. what a picture.
Yes.
Who are the below the line cast members for this people?
Well, I mean, the big one is Emma Thompson,
Yeah.
who is uncredited as the doctor who cures cancer and then dies. We see her at the very beginning, and then we see a picture of her in a news broadcast, and then never again.
Such a weird cameo.
Weird. I could have sworn the voice of the president on the radio was Brad Pitt, but I had no way of confirming that.
Yeah, it said a different name, so I'm not sure. Maybe he was going, because I know Brad Pitt likes to do alter egos, while doing uncredited stuff. But
right, as does his buddy Matt Damon. But I didn't see him. I didn't see him in the credits anywhere either. So that's probably just my ears playing tricks on me, or them getting a sound alike or something. But yeah, I Am Legend, the third adaptation of the Robert Matheson story, I Am Legend. What is it about I Am Legend that is that's so adaptable, that's so engaging? James, your thoughts?
I mean, growing up and really liking the story by Matheson, and then also really digging Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, because who doesn't like Vincent Price? And the Omega Man with Charlton Heston, with completely different version of the story with big brained mutants, and it's more sci-fi. So you had like Last Man on Earth, which is like actual horror. Then you had Omega Man, which was more to sci-fi, and you have I Am Legend, which is kind of a mashup of horror and sci-fi
with a lot of action kind of peppered in.
Yeah, 2007, like the action sci-fi genre. But I mean, really, it's kind of like watching it again after so many years. It actually like kind of got me in a different way, because seeing a plague take over the world, and people wearing masks and getting infected, and then the worst case scenario, closing off borders and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh wow, this is actually really relevant now. It's kind of scary, actually.
It hits real different in 2022 than it did in 2007. I can tell you that for free.
And plus, New York City. I mean, originally they wanted to film it in L.A. and then they were to do it in Houston, but then I'm kind of glad they did the New York City thing, because what's scary to see in New York City? Just nobody around, just everything just destroyed. Just kind of just dead to the world, and that's scary. Like, that is actually more scary than anything, because I think even, I don't know if it was Francis Lawrence or someone said that when they were going to do it in L.A., the problem is at 3 p.m., parts of L.A. look dead anyway. New York City is the opposite. It's like it could be 2 a.m. and it's people wandering around, in various states of, whatever they're under the influence. But yeah, it's like, and living in New York City, it kind of like hit me in a weird way, because, you watch a movie, you're like, oh wow, I know those areas. I know that store. I know that restaurant. I know Other Music, the record store across the street from the video store he's taking movies from. And, again, I think a lot of people don't want to admit that post-apocalyptic stories kind of touch a nerve with people, because it could happen at any time. Something can trigger, a nuclear explodes, anything. And this is various states of like fear. And like, people like to go to movies with fear. They like to be scared. They like to see something that doesn't seem like it could happen, but what if it does?
Right.
And that's the scary part. And and then of course Will Smith being the big, especially at that time, the big box office draw, and the second in a row of I movies that he did. I, Robot first in 2004.
Both based on classic sci-fi horror novels, right?
Very, very weird run. And I try to imagine the world we would have been in if this movie actually got made with Arnold Schwarzenegger starring, which is crazy. But that would have been complete, like, oh yeah, action horror movie, But we don't live in that world. We live in the Will Smith one. And I have to say, watching it again after so many years, I actually liked it more than the initial couple of viewings that I had back in the late 2000s, especially after the DVD came out and with the alternate endings, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, yeah.
But again, this is a story that has been adapted 3 times, but I don't think anyone's ever truly captured the actual story.
Right. And I think a big part of that is because the story is so influential on so much of our horror fiction now.
at this point, it's the pieces that haven't been adapted have been used pretty much everywhere else, right? So,
oh yeah,
I mean,
zombie. It's basically a zombie. Yeah, Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it wears its on its sleeve, but it's Matheson was one of those authors that he's so influential that people almost forget who he is. And then when you watch movies and TV shows and you go, oh, I've seen this story before. It's like, yeah, a few authors wrote all these stories, basically.
Right.
And
he's up there with Asimov, with Bova, with Ellison,
Phil
as those,
yeah, like those guys.
Yeah, those guys that really kind of defined what science fiction would become.
100%.
Have you read the story I Am Legend?
Yeah. I actually, funny side story. I still have a copy that my friend let me borrow. Probably, I'm going to say around 2003, 2004, and I still have it to this day. And I'm no longer friends with him. I don't know where I don't know. He stole some stuff.
But you've always got something to remember him by.
Yeah, I have that to remember. You know, he has some of my stuff that he actually stole because he was a drug addict, but whatever.
Oh, nope. Okay.
So I'm keeping the book.
I mean, look, that's the least you can do.
Yes.
Is keep the book. Brett, what about you? What's your kind of history with I Am Legend? What do you find so appealing about the story? Do you find the story appealing? Give us your background on this one, sir.
I have zero. I just have this movie.
Just this movie, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I love a good apocalypse story. That's about it. I'm sorry I don't have more for you. But that's
good. You're good, man. And I know you're a big fan of vampires, and I know you're a big fan of zombies. And this movie posits what if zombies were vampires? Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll get into what these are here. I think a little later, because that is one of my talking points. Is what the hell are these things?
They were originally fairly intelligent vampires in the original story, weren't they?
Right.
I think so.
Yeah. They spoke. Yeah. They congregated. They had plans. You know, they weren't just like mindless freaks that running around.
And I think this leans more into some of the more zombie-esque tropes of the thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm with you, Brett. I don't really have a lot of background on this. I've seen parodies of the Omega Man, such as the Homega Man from the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. I think back in season 9, that's season 9 at Treehouse of Horror. So, I mean, I've got that. And I think I've seen like probably clips from the original Omega Man, and then I remember when I was working at the bookstore, a lot of people loved this book. Like this book it was fairly tough to keep on the shelves. People were constantly buying it. And it was kind of one of those, like, this looks interesting. Maybe I should read this. And then the Will Smith movie came out and I saw it and it kind of killed any interest in me reading the book. So, but I don't know, after this rewatch, like, again, it like it did with you, James, it kind of struck a little differently this time. Mm-hmm. So I might be a little more inclined to return and perhaps visit that novel for the first time. So
yeah, it's been on my list for a while to read because it seems right up my alley, and I just never got around to it. But also with this movie, I remember when it first came out, I didn't really care for it, but I liked it much better this time. Probably because, as we've stated, it's a little different now.
Yeah, it's a different. It definitely like so many so much post-apocalyptic fiction now. It just kind of hits a little like it, and it's also kind of like the type of movie where the day just repeats over and over. There's a name for it, and I just completely forgot what it was. And now we've all forgotten it too. Because
I didn't know that thing actually had a. I thought they just named it after Groundhog Day.
Right. But that style of movie, I know Palm Springs and Russian Doll kind of got a lot of attention for that kind of, and the fact that, living in a quarantine space for as long as most of us did, we kind of were living the same day over and over. Like that kind of fiction also hits a little differently now. So, I mean, there are so many different types of fiction that kind of resonate with us differently now in this world in which we live, for good or ill. Probably ill on some level, but no, I mean, at least I enjoyed this movie a little more as a result. So, there's that anyway. I'm going to stop talking before I get myself into more trouble. Hey, before we get too much deeper, let's go ahead and talk the plot of this movie. We usually do that in about 60 seconds or less. For new listeners, first of all, welcome. But we normally do a segment called The Plot in 60 Seconds, where we try to recount the plot of the movie we're discussing in 60 seconds or less. Normally, Brett or I will do that at the behest of our friend, the Coin of Justice. But when we have a guest, we do enjoy letting them take a crack at the wheel. So, James, you have just graciously agreed to step up and do that for us. And so whenever you're ready, sir, I've got 1 minute on the clock. I'll give you the 30 and 10-second warnings.
Okay.
And have at it, sir.
Okay. Will Smith is Robert Neville, the sole survivor after helping start a plague with Emma Thompson that has killed more than 5 billion people. He did try to cure cancer after all, but it sadly created a majority of mutated, vampiric, zombie, muscular, but also emaciated creatures with the vocal talents of Mike Patton. Neville and his canine companion drive around New York City, trying to and badly hunting deer, going to the video store and talk to the mannequins because being alone can drive anyone crazy. Still trying to find a cure and putting out a beacon for any survivors. What happens when these creatures start to show some intelligence? And even more so, what happens when a pair of survivors come into Neville's life? His life might actually get turned upside down after all. Yo, Holmes, smell you later. This is I Am Legend.
That's amazing. With 15 seconds left to spare.
There you go.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible,
Well
Mr.
done.
McCormick.
Thank you. Yeah, this morning, my girlfriend asked me, "Oh, how's the prep?" I'm like, "Oh, I just kind of threw in some Fresh Prince lyrics," and she goes, "What?" I'm like, "Forget it," because she's never seen the movie and she likes Fresh Prince, but she's not really a Will Smith fan. So I'm like, "I'll explain later when you come back from Baltimore. I'll explain."
Okay. It's a shame she's not out in West Philadelphia.
I know, it would have been perfect. Damn it.
Right? At any rate, let's start with the Will Smith of it all here. Because roundabout, wow, words are hard. When you're a podcaster, you should probably talk well, and then here's me just like tripping over myself with every other word. Will Smith, of course, gets his start as the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or actually just the Fresh Prince, which he then parlays into a television show, and then begins slowly but surely to become an actor. Films like Independence Day, 6 Degrees of Separation, Bad Boys, Men in Black, very quickly becomes a box office draw.
Yeah, it was that time he had the every movie was like $1 billion movie every year. And it's like, wow, this guy is like untouchable.
Mr. 4th of July.
Yeah.
Like he would open those big 4th of July release movies and just kill at the box office. Like what were your thoughts of Will Smith back in the mid to late 90s when he was really popping off? Like what was your exposure to, reaction to him?
I've always liked, until recently, I've always liked Will Smith. I always, and I've always thought he has that natural charisma. Like you can't help but like him, even like if he's being a dick, you're still like, okay, he's acting like a dick. And does that necessarily make him a good actor? 6 Degrees of Separation, I think, is one of his best roles because that's kind of before the whole Will Smith train kept going. He's really good.
It's kind of pre-persona, really.
And he's really good in that movie. He's like,
he's actually acting there as opposed to just putting on the Will Smith.
Exactly. So movies like Bad Boys 2, although, you like the fun, freaking Agent J, like ridiculousness, but he's,
I make this look good.
Yeah. Always one-liners, always has a song featured in like one of his movies of some sort. And I've always, I always enjoyed him. But then something, I don't know what it was, but then I think it's around the time when he started to try to take himself more seriously and doing movies like The Pursuit of Happiness and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. That's phase 2.
Yeah. So that's kind of when I kind of went, okay, I'm not really going to see his movies anymore. I'm not like actively seeking out his movies or like, what was that? The Legend of Bagger Vance, where he's the stereotypical helpful black character in a movie.
Yeah, the magical black character. Yeah.
So I'm like, what happened? Like, you had a good thing and something, but again, a lot of actors like to try to stretch themselves and branch out, and it doesn't always work for all of them. And I think that's kind of what happened to Will Smith.
And I think he is in a lot of ways perhaps trying to recapture some of that now that he's finally got his Oscar. It seems like he's kind of wanting to go back to that well.
Yeah, well, he got that Oscar and then,
At what
Yeah,
cost?
exactly. The infamous slap, which when it happened, I thought it was a joke. Like when it actually initially happened, I'm like, oh, this can't be real.
Mm-hmm.
And then and you're like, oh no, it actually really happened, and it wasn't a skit. Okay.
Mm-mm.
And then you're like, why would anyone do that?
This is not one of those famous Chris Rock bits.
No, or like Will Smith just trying to be fun at the Oscars. No, and again, we don't know what the heck, like there's all this stuff about private life and like stuff with his wife and whatever it is. It's still no excuse. You don't do that, especially on live TV.
Agreed.
Like, I mean, like again, like separate from this, but I'm a wrestling fan, and there's lots of times wrestlers don't like each other, and they might get into scuffles behind the scenes, and it gets reported on and whatever. And you go, aren't you all grown people?
Yeah.
But then again, when they're in front of the cameras, they have to act civil. They have to quote unquote act and be normal and like whatever. You would think it would be the same thing, but sometimes people slip and have a bad day, and I guess Will Smith was having a bad day that day, and really hasn't helped him since, because it kind of like got canceled from a lot of movies and a lot of stuff,
which we'll talk about toward the end of this episode. We'll circle back to that point specifically.
Kind of crazy actually about that,
Brett, Will Smith thoughts, sir?
Kind of the same. I was a big fan of him in the 90s. I loved all the big blockbuster stuff he was doing, and then he just kind of fell off in phase 2, as you said, and I just stopped going to his movies. He wasn't really doing anything I was interested in anymore.
Which, I mean, phase 2 starts... I mean, phase 1 is short. Like, phase 1 starts with maybe... phase 1 starts with Bad Boys, probably, because 6 Degrees Separation is just a couple years before Bad Boys. He does Bad Boys in 95, Independence Day in 96, Men in Black in 97, Enemy of the State in 99, and Wild Wild West in 99. Future episode of this podcast, Wild Wild West. One that we've had on the schedule and canceled at least once, for various reasons. And then we start, 2000 starts phase 2, because we got The Legend of Bagger Vance in 2000, Ali in 2001, which I would argue is good, actually.
Yeah, I'll say that too.
Yeah.
That's his first Oscar nomination is for Ali. Men in Black 2 in 2002, which is bad, actually. Yes. Bad Boys 2 in 2003, which is good, actually.
Yeah.
2004, we've got iRobot and Shark Tale. 2005 is Hitch. 2006 is Pursuit of Happiness, which leads us to 2007, which is I Am Legend. After this, it's Hancock, 7 Pounds, and Men in Black 3. And at that point, he's done. Like, this is kind of the beginning of the end of the Will Smith train, is this movie, I Am Legend, which I find really very interesting. That this movie is the kind of one that sort of... Because Hitch is still pretty big. Like, Hitch comes out, people like it. Pursuit of Happiness, he gets his second Oscar nomination. But then the year after I Am Legend, it's Hancock, it's 7 Pounds, which is another very blatant Oscar play, and then it's nothing for 4 years until Men in Black 3.
Wow. That's crazy to think that, because he was on a roll, and then, then you think, what happened? What happened? Was he producing more as opposed to acting? I mean, he wasn't really doing the music.
I can look into
but
that.
I'm saying, like, was he really doing his music at that time? Not really. Like,
no.
Maybe the rumored Scientology stuff was going on at that time.
He's not really producing much. Right. He produces. I think that's the point where he starts getting more involved in his kid's career, because the one producer credit that he has in there is the 2010 Jaden Smith karate.
Okay.
Another future episode of this podcast.
A lot of future episodes. But no, I mean that's true. I mean, I guess, and in a way, isn't that good though? He was like wanted to focus on his kids. I mean, hell, and I Am Legend, Willow's in that movie as his daughter. So even back then, he was starting.
Well, there's a rumor, there's something that came out, and I don't know how true this is, but it was essentially that Will Smith said to his kids, look, if you don't do this thing that I do, I'm not going to be able to relate to you.
Oh, wow. If that's true, then.
Which that kind of casts kind of maybe a negative pall over that, being involved in his kids' lives, because he's basically trying to make them what he is. And they've all essentially rejected that at this point.
I think, you know what? It's true, because like if you notice, like Jaden especially has like almost become like anti-fame. Like to the point, like
in a very Shia LaBeouf
kind of
way.
Without the at least what we see, without the spousal abuse.
Fingers
I know. I
crossed.
hope so. But
One can
yeah,
hope,
right.
yeah.
Hope. But that's true.
We live
I
in
didn't.
hope.
Yeah, I actually didn't even think about that. Yeah, like sometimes it's it's a thing. A lot of my friends that have kids right now tell me that, oh man, I really want them to be into what I'm into, and I tell them straight up, well then don't force it on them, let them find it.
Mhm.
Like, and one of my friends,
Yeah.
his kids found horror, and he's a horror fan, and now they relate to it because they came to
Mhm.
him. Oh, Dad, have you ever seen Evil Dead? And he's like, yeah, I have. Oh my God, you like it?
Do you know there's a
Yeah, no,
trilogy?
exactly, and that's exactly. And they're like, "What?" But stuff like that is great. But I have other friends that I could tell they've tried to force certain things or sports on them, and kids sometimes just don't want to play sports. I was one of those kids. Me too.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay home on my computer or play D&D with my friends. That's all I wanted to do.
D&D was verboten in my house.
Well, yeah, that's of the devil for your house. It's fine in mine. So
Correct.
Well, I didn't do it in my house. I always went out to other people's houses. So my parents.
Oh, see, I wasn't allowed to go out because all my friends lived far enough away, and my parents would have to drive me, and it'd be
Okay,
a whole thing.
so I understand. But yeah,
So I didn't have any local friends. And I didn't drive till I was 20 because I'm really cool. In a city with no public transportation, because again, really cool. But yeah, I mean, and then we get this weird career resurgence for Will Smith after that. As a result, another future episode of this podcast, After Earth.
After Earth, yeah.
Yeah, Winter's Tale, Focus, Concussion, Suicide Squad felt like it was going to be something, and then that movie sucked out loud. Yeah. Collateral Beauty with Margot Robbie, Bright, another future episode of this podcast, Aladdin, where he plays the genie.
That was a hit.
Yeah, that was. I think they're doing a sequel to it, or they've talked about doing a sequel to it.
Really?
Gemini Man, Spies in Disguise, Bad Boys for Life, and then his Academy Award winning role in King Richard. Like, these last several years for him have been really kind of
lackluster. Yeah, like those are all films. And you know what's funny? Like I'm thinking about it. Besides Suicide Squad, which again I agree, terrible movie. The sequel is much better because it actually gets what the story's about.
The sequel starring Alice Braga.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. We'll get into Alice Braga. Like she reminds me of a newer version of Maria Conchita Alonso.
Oh,
like she's in these great genre pictures, like action. And again, Maria Conchita Alonso was in Predator 2, and she's in Predators. So they have like a weird and The Queen of the South, which was a great TV series. It's great. Yeah, it just finished a couple of years. Like she's basically becomes this big time drug kingpin in a world of men, and she's like, she's killing people. But again, like she's another film I think you guys should cover is Repo Men that she did with Jude Law about the people stealing. They would come like, if you don't pay your bills, well, we're taking your heart. What? No.
Which, I mean, that's Repo the Genetic Opera. That's similar premise, except Repo the Genetic Opera has some opera. Which
is weird. I think the book came out around the same time too. It's like, was that something in the world at the time? Like, you got to be careful that if you owe money, you might have to give your spleen or something.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many movies that kind of run those weird parallels, and this is kind of a season where zombies are kind of starting to make a resurgence in 2007. So let's ask the question then. What the hell are these things? Are they vampires? Are they zombies? Brett, we had a big long discussion on our World War Z episode about what constitutes and qualifies as a zombie. So you're kind of the person I tend to defer to on questions like this. What say you, sir? I say
they're vampires. Period. End of story.
Okay.
They have zombie tendencies, but they're not dead. They're not mindless. Not all of them, anyway. They seem to be evolving, and some of them have intelligence. And they don't seem to eat people.
Yeah.
They just kill them.
But they don't really consume blood either. And is that not a...
Well, I think they do, because that's...
They do.
Because that's how he gets the alpha female. He puts this little blood vial, and like that attracts her. But again, you don't see them eating anybody. But then again, you don't see excuse me, any bodies anywhere either. Like, so we don't know. But what do they eat besides maybe a little bit of blood? But there's not many people out there at this time. So how are they surviving? Like,
well, I mean, we do know there's
that's
deer.
true. I guess they're
lions.
going for the animals, any dogs or maybe the birds flying around.
Yeah, and we do see the infected. Well, I mean, birds aren't real, so they really couldn't eat birds. We've established that already on this podcast. Birds aren't real. But I mean, yeah. So they've got kind of the animals that they could be feeding off. We do see the infected dogs as well.
That is an interesting thing too, because if you notice that is a plot point that he even mentions that people can either getting bit or blood or from the airborne, but dogs and I guess other animals, it's just by being bit, which is very vampiric way. And I agree with Brett. Like, you would think like the way they like run around, they're like rage zombies, and that's actually closer to what they are. Like they're living, they're not dead.
That's how they seem to be portrayed here.
Yeah, and again, we have the smart alpha male that actually can do planning stuff and actually get everyone together, organize them. Yeah, which again, weird enough, is almost, and after this film is like in Land of the Dead with zombies, where you have George Romero showing, I guess you could quote and say, the evolution of zombies, but that's really only a Romero trope, of zombies becoming quote unquote intelligent, or is it really intelligent, or are they just kind of remembering certain aspects of their life? Who knows? I mean,
I think we can pretty much call any Romero trope canon when it comes to zombies, because the man invented the modern zombie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
He did, yeah.
I would say his lore is more or less zombie canon.
Yeah, before Night of the Living Dead, zombies were just from Haiti, and they were just, guys with big bug eyes, voodoo.
Yeah.
Voodoo zombies.
That's all they were.
Like the serpent in the rainbow, the Craven
exactly
there, yeah. Which is, that's more in line with what historical zombies are, but Romero kind of takes that and turns it on its head, and it becomes this undead thing. And of course, Romero very influenced by is it Richard or Robert Matheson? Richard Matheson. I think I called him Robert earlier. Let me stop that barrage of tweets. Let me stop that Twitter storm. I recant my calling him Robert earlier. The character in this movie is Robert. That's why I think I made that mistake. But Romero's very influenced by the Richard Matheson novel, and I mean, even to the point where the endings are somewhat similar between the original book and the and Night of the Living Dead, which I think Night of the Living Dead may be one of the bleakest endings in cinema history.
Absolutely.
I mean, just an absolute fucking gut punch in the worst possible way, but yet so incredibly apt and so understated with regard to the story that he's trying to tell. And I think the ending is what makes that movie so resonant. And the reason that it became a cult classic and then a legitimate classic. Yeah,
like a Criterion film, so much so. But I mean, again, you got to think it. Night of the Living Dead during the height of the civil rights movement, and you cast a black man as the star, the hero, and he wins. You're like, oh my god, he survived the night, and just gets shot by a bunch of rednecks because throw another one on the pile. And you're like, and I remember, that's a movie as a kid when I watched it, I went and I cried. And my dad's like, why are you crying? I'm like,
yeah,
well, he was supposed to survive. And my dad's like, well, and it was a good lesson. It's like, well, good things don't always happen to good people. And it was something as a young kid, I go, oh shit, okay, that's, to this day, close to 38 years later. Oh yeah, that's true. You're right, Dad. Thanks for the depressing news, as a kid. But again, and it's such a crazy thing to think that oh my god, and those still photos at the end of that film when it's showing the actual just thrown bodies, and you're like,
right,
oh, this is different levels right here. It's not just a horror movie. And again, great horror will always have that element of other things going on as opposed to just some slasher movies. And I love slasher movies, but a slasher movie where, okay, they're killing people, there's really nothing behind it. It's just a fun, gore fest. But great horror will transcend just a horror trope. and that's what Night of the Living Dead did. And lucky for us, Romero got to make a few other great ones and a few not so great, but that's okay. It's okay,
Right, and he's allowed. Look, he's
100%.
allowed. And I think any good genre fiction, honestly, I wouldn't even just include horror in that, but science fiction, Western, any good genre fiction is going to be, it's a way to make a comment on what we're going through now without setting it right now. Like it basically doing a Casablanca, but making it, changing just enough and changing the setting and the world to where it might not be Nazi Germany. We might be living somewhere else. Like that's the revolutionary thing about a movie like Casablanca is it's set. Future episode of this podcast, Casablanca. What? They wanted to do a sequel to Casablanca, Brett.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Yes, they did.
That's the thing that happened. So we could technically cover Casablanca on this podcast. Brett was looking at me like I was a zombie there for a second. You love Casablanca, right? That's one of your all-time favorite movies, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Have you seen Casablanca?
Well, of course I've seen it, but it's not like.
Well, I like the film. I think Maltese Falcon's a better Humphrey Bogart film, but
I mean, you'll get no argument from me. But I mean, look, there's something about those last 10 minutes of Casablanca that's just absolutely transcendent. The scene where they're singing the Marseille. Why the fuck are we talking about Casablanca?
Right, yes. We went from zombies to Casablanca.
And now
what happened?
I want a movie set in Casablanca time with zombies. I think that'd be great.
Hell yes. A World War II zombie film.
Put zombies into a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Like, that was the big thing.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, let's do it with movies. Casablanca and zombies.
You're greenlit.
But no, it's that kind of thing where that's the revolutionary thing about Casablanca is you're making a comment on World War II in the middle of World War II. And like and Chaplin does the same thing with The Great Dictator as well. Like there's a chance Hitler actually saw.
I think he did. I think actually after that film he was on his shit list basically. Like, if he comes to Germany, I'm killing him. Okay, I did something good. Yeah. Okay.
Which and again, that film becomes, that kind of movie becomes increasingly more difficult to make. I think the last time we really saw something like that is The Interview, the James Franco Seth Rogen film where they interview Randall Park playing Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un. Sorry, and that led to Sony getting their emails hacked and everyone learning way too much about the Spider-Man franchise. And also when we found out they wanted to do a crossover between Men in Black and 21
Which I'm
Jump
still
Street.
sad they never did.
That could have been fun. It would have been completely bonkers and completely bananas, but that's literally the joke at the end of 22 Jump Street is let's see how fucking bonkers we can make this damn thing.
And also that they really only wanted to reboot Ghostbusters purely for the money. They gave no shits about the franchise. They just wanted to reboot it for the money.
Which, I mean, every subsequent attempt at trying to recapture that magic seems, Look, all these decisions are made for monetary reasons. We know that. That's not new.
But sometimes, and that's the thing with film. Like, yes, a blockbuster can be a blockbuster, but you have certain people behind the scenes, and even like when you read about like Francis Lawrence talking about the absence of sound, like certain people, like even though this is just a popcorn film, there's a little bit more behind it. They tried to, that's when I appreciate something like this, like especially, does the CGI hold up? Not really, but again,
no,
it looks better than some of the CGI I've seen recently, which is actually really sad that it's actually kind of degrading over the years.
And they originally were going to do it with prosthetics. They originally had makeup and there were actual physical actors playing these vampiric zombies or zombie vampires or whatever you want to call them.
Dark Seekers.
Yeah,
Dark
Seekers.
The Dark Seekers. Good call. That's the name from the book as well. So the Dark Seekers, and then like a week into production, they decided it looked too fake and said, we'll just do it with CG.
Then it looks more fake.
And that feels like a mistake.
Well, it's kind of like the same thing they did to the Thing prequel. We have these great practical effects. It doesn't look that good. Let's make it CG. So you put CG over the practical. What?
which I mean, there's only and we talked about this last week with Brian Kuiper on our Bubba Hotep episode, but that's something that makes like a movie like Jurassic Park work, but no one has ever been able to recapture that kind of magic again. Like to the extent that even in The Thing, with over a decade of lead-in time, it still looks fake as hell. Even though you've got real good practical effects and you're grafting the CGI over it, it still lacks the tactility that you get that Phil Tippett and the CGI people at ILM were able to capture so beautifully in 1993.
I know. A movie that's still like, if you know, and I was 13 when Jurassic Park came out, and I was at the height of my dinosaur love. So it was like, you know, a film comes into your life.
You're wearing a Jurassic Park shirt right now.
Not intended at all. But no, I did not. And that's the thing. A film that still to this day I will just throw on when I'm in a bad mood, and just to watch. Not even watch the film itself, just to see the special, you know, like to see the dinosaurs and still going, wait, that's practical or is that CGI? Like, if you can't tell,
exactly,
then you've done it well. But if you right away you go, ooh, that looks like a PS2 cutscene, there's a problem there. You know, it doesn't look real. It doesn't look like I can actually grab it. And certain parts of the film of I Am Legend, you could tell, again, it's actually someone physically there, or something actually is physically grabbing Robert Neville and throwing around,
like when the alpha female is on the table. Like a lot of that feels very tactile. Certain shots of that, let me say,
100%,
feel very
100%.
tactile.
And again, it's sometimes you go, so how did the real stuff look fake, but then this looks better? Like, and again, we're talking about big time producers who would want to cut costs as much as they can, and this actually made the movie cost more.
And longer post-production
and reshoots
time,
and all this stuff. So it's very odd to me when that happens. You think of the opposite. Oh, wait, you mean we can cut $10 million from this? But again, not every film has Robert Rodriguez behind it. So a guy that's like, oh, I'm willing to take off $10 million off the budget. Oh, really, Robert? Thanks.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I mean, and this is something that Brett and I talk about all the time. Like we're practical effect apologists. Like we love those tactile practical effects. And that was one of the things that when we had Brian and Michelle on last week for Bubba Hotep that we talked about a lot, is that dumb scarab beetle in Bubba Hotep. It looks fake as hell, but it's a real scarab beetle that Bruce Campbell was actually playing off of. And you can tell that there are people there that Will Smith is playing off of. And I do want to get into the difficulty of the kind of role he's playing here a little bit. You can tell there's things there that he's actually playing off of, but by the same token, it helps his performance, but it doesn't help anything else. Like for that, because the CGI, that's the first thing that's not going to age well in your movie is the CGI.
Especially like
even before the comedy goes stale.
You're CGI right, and this film, like watching again after probably close to a decade at least, watching it again and going, okay, this is looking good. The city looks great, you know, like, but then all of a sudden when you see those deer, and I'm like, ooh. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm remembering. And even back in 2007, I thought it didn't look that good. So I'm like, oh, this looks really bad. And then the lions come out, and you're like, they're not there. Like, no.
And then you see the dark seekers, and then it's all pretty much
the
all
dark
downhill
seekers,
from
like
there.
They vary in look. Like the alpha male, at least you could tell it's. I forgot the actor's name. He has an interesting name. He was from Ray Donovan.
I'll find it. Dash Miho.
I remember him from Ray Donovan. He played, I think, his brother.
Okay.
Got a very distinct look. He has so I can see it in the CGI face, but again, nobody's mouth opens like that big. And again, we've seen vampires with opening maws in Blade 2 from practical effects. It can be done. You can figure it out, but you know, sometimes the artistry is lost. And you know, nothing against the CGI artists, too, because they have a tough time trying to do it. And plus, they get paid shit. They get paid garbage, you know.
Yep. They get paid shit. They're made to work shit hours, and they're made to work under terrible conditions to try to put out something that we're just going to come in and lambast on a fucking podcast.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't hold it against them always, but again, just give me practical. Just give me the practical effects.
Well, I wonder if it has something to do with maybe this Hollywood is stuck on, well, we have to move into the future. We have to constantly be innovating. We can't do practical effects. That's old school Hollywood.
I know.
We don't do that.
I think you're right. I think that's a mentality. I mean, and every so often that's why you get 3D back. Oh, 3D is the craze. And it lasts like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
The TVs come out 3D and then they don't last. And then, oh, wait.
I'm sure Avatar 2 will bring it back.
I was going to say, there's a new Avatar movie coming out at the end of the year. I'm sure it'll roll right back.
You need a 5D. I know.
Well, I mean, there's 4DX. That's the thing that exists.
With the ones with the water that sprays on you.
Yeah, the chair. You can like the smells that they pipe into your chair, and
watching the Batman like that recently. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine being strapped.
Oh my god, it was
3
terrible.
hours, just getting like battered around. Ugh. I get kind of queasy on those rides at like theme parks where they've got the giant screen and you're in the little car that's like just
basically what it is
around. Like I get. And that's literally 4DX is just that for the feature length, and no,
please get rid of that in theaters, please. But that's beside the point. But yeah, the worst.
Sure. And I mean, we don't have those here in the Midwest, so maybe outside of Chicago, where neither of us live. But you're in the belly of the beast. You're in New York City, so if they're gonna have them, they're gonna have them there.
Never again. It's not worth the money either. It's like more money to be.
You're at ground zero. That's your set.
Yes, ground zero. Take a shot. How many times it says ground zero in this movie? Like, especially like later on, ground zero.
Right.
I'd be dead. We get it. Well.
Yeah.
It's only really poignant that one time when he's really saying it as a callback to the flashback scene.
Yeah.
And then it's like only that he's repeating himself, and that makes the scene a little bit more impactful. No. But other than that, it doesn't.
He does.
He says it way too often.
Yeah. And again, but it lends itself well to that one moment later in the film. So worth it? Question mark?
Maybe.
And this feels, and again, this is a part of the phase 2 of Will Smith's career where he's demanding to be taken seriously as an actor and slowly kind of moving away from his goofier roles and into more serious ones. And this feels like this and Hancock feel like a foot in both worlds. Like he's trying to play the kind of character that he would play in Ali or The Pursuit of Happiness in the kind of genre fare that he had been most associated with at this point. And like someone like a Tom Hanks who did Castaway around this time, or maybe a little, probably a few years prior, if memory serves, it's basically just him for most of the runtime of this movie. And the only things that he has to play off of are a dog and mannequins and CG. Like, or, some, apparently they had actual actors that they would graft the CG over, but like, that's all he's playing off of. So it's essentially a one-man show, which is really difficult. Like to both for a performer and to watch as an audience member. Like it's very tough, really tough.
And originally, I think when they originally tried to make this movie in the 90s, the original script I think had no dialogue for the first hour. So imagine but again, if you're by yourself, I mean, I'm by myself. I'm talking to myself all the time. Like, oh, what should I do?
Same.
But we just do it. We just do it. So. But just imagine if there's nobody around and like you're like, okay, I guess I'm not going to talk. So I think that's why they threw in the dog and the mannequins to kind of. He is going crazy in a way, but I mean, he's by himself. Mm-hmm. He basically thinks I'm the only survivor and I'm immune to this disease. So I'm just going to either die of old age, or if these things catch me and just rip me apart. And and it's kind of it's a sad life because he has this. Again, ground zero, I have to find this cure. And we see in his little lab, actually it's a big lab, I shouldn't say a little, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's massive. I know.
And honestly, it looks like the same set they used for Dark Knight when he's doing the crime. It looks like the same set just with a lot more shit.
It does, and what's interesting is like, I just wonder how much the rent he was paying for that place, because I have friends that actually, while this movie was being made, they would not see this movie because they lived in that area and they kept closing down the streets like for weeks on end, and they hated Will Smith. And Will Smith's even talked about this, like he was used to people sticking up their middle fingers at him. So he had like that initial growth of like hatred because of people in New York City going, "Fuck you, man!" Like, we're trying to live our lives and you're filming a movie. But again, in a way, I kind of like that they filmed the movie in New York City as opposed to let's go to Toronto and make it look like New York City, like most other films.
You can always tell. You can always tell.
Same thing with when they do like, I think they do Vancouver for like Chicago or like other cities, and like, or weird enough, like RoboCop, you do Houston for Detroit, whatever. Right. But again,
I think what John Carpenter used like Austin or something for
yes,
New York and Escape
so.
from New York, something like that.
And again, you know, you watch, you go, it doesn't look like New York, but again, it's a prison, so you go, okay, I guess it's not really supposed to. But seeing these like landmarks, and again, some things don't make sense, like one bridge next to the other. It's like, no, that's actually not the layout. But if you're not from New York City, you're not going to know that. So it's moving.
Which a majority of people
no, this movie, and that's fine. I mean, but me, I'm going, wait a second. Or him driving and like, how did he get there in like 2 minutes? Like, that's really far. You're not going to make it, even with no traffic. Again, it reminds me, again, of the beginning of the pandemic, especially when my girlfriend was going to work, because she still is, but she was a funeral director. So she was in the heart of it. Again, she was dealing with the body. So she had to go to work every day. But the only thing she loved was the traffic because there was nobody driving. So she would get to work in like, usually it would take 45 minutes. It took her 20 minutes every day. She's like, well, that's good, except for the piles of bodies I have to deal with. So then thinking about this movie, I'm like, oh my God, you know, like it's really like triggering me in a lot of ways. And like, is it good or bad? Again, it feels, you know, I don't know if you guys ever seen Logan's Run. Okay.
Oh yeah, hell yeah! Future episode
amazing.
Of the podcast.
One of my favorites because it's just so weird a film, and certain things in this movie reminded me of that for some reason. Like when they're out, you know, in the open, like away from the city, and they're just wandering, and it's just wasteland and nothing around except for just the two of them, and like that. Like again, I don't know why I love stuff like that. Like, you know, movies like The Road, where it's so depressing, but it's just people just wandering and there's nothing around for so long. It creeps me out because living in a big city, when I moved to like smaller town at one point in my life, I hated it. It drove me crazy. I need the sound. I need noise. Like if I don't wake up to someone hawking a loogie and cursing at someone else, I don't know where I am. Like,
Are you really?
Seriously,
are you really
I think
alive at that
I'll wake up and I'm like, why is it? I mean, again, my apartment's actually better than old. Like, it actually is kind of quiet neighborhood. But again, every so often I'll hear just someone screaming out expletives for no reason, or playing a bad saxophone, and you're like, is it Gary Busey playing it? What's going on? Yeah, it might. You know, he might be around. I don't know. It's creepy, but again. I don't know how I would survive by myself in a world where I think everyone else is dead. So, like, again, talking about him just being by himself, that's a hard role. It is. Like, and again, he's convincing enough that he's trying to play it cool. You can tell he loves his dog so much because the puppy that his daughter left with him. And when we get to that scene, I cried again. Like, I cried in the theater. I know. You know what? I was going to, but I'm like, I have to watch it again. And I'm like sobbing on my couch in the middle of the night. I'm like, yeah, you got me again, Will. You got me.
I've cried too much in the last week. I didn't want to do it again. I had to skip.
And I think I think the movie, like, while I've liked it better this time, I still think from the beginning of the movie to that point, it's a really great film. I think it like works really well.
Yeah.
And I'm nothing against when you add the whole concept of like other survivors. That's in the original story. It's not like it's different. It's just changed a little bit. But I really think up until that point, like if you ended the film with that depressing scene of him having to kill the only companion in the world at this time, would have been the most ballsy thing to do. Right. But also would have been like, and you know what? If you wanted, you could have had a sequel and we would never have covered it. But it would have like gone right from there. But course, we have to have, crazy Will Smith afterwards wanting revenge for it because he knows why it's happened now.
And the ending of the book and the ending of the movie are vastly different. Like, the movie ends with basically a zombie free-for-all, and Will Smith blowing himself up to save the future of humanity. The book, from what I understand, ends basically he falls in love with a woman who is essentially a living vampire who doesn't have, kind of a daywalker, I suppose, and not a dark seeker. And she is part of this new society of the living vampires that are the living infected, I think is what the book calls them, that are basically forming a new society. And he's like, no, I'll be accepted. And no, spoiler, he's not. And so they're going to execute him. And she basically, as a mercy, gives him suicide pills, which he takes.
And it's the whole concept of it ends with him realizing, I am the villain. I've been killing their kind, like in their crypts while they sleep.
And he had been he had killed her husband, I think, as well. So I mean, there's that kind of very heavy, very dark, very bleak ending. Which this movie does have kind of a dour ending, but it's nowhere near as bleak as something like Night of the Living Dead or the novel. Like it's a very different kind of
I was about to say the Mist. And that's not even the original book's ending, which is even crazier.
Oh,
but that's the one that
Darabont's
I should have written that.
I'm gonna outdo you, Kate. Yeah.
Hold my beer, Steve.
No,
Steve's like, I don't do this anymore. Like,
get it away, please. Remember Maximum Overdrive? Come on.
let's not relive Maximum Overdrive.
No, you're right, and
please.
and as Jim from my podcast would attest, it's nothing more than I love than a bleak ending. I love bleak endings. Like I live for them. I live for a bleak ending because it just shows that filmmakers, I don't want to say have the balls. I don't like that term, but have the guts to actually say, you know what, we're not going to give you a happy ending because you don't always deserve a happy ending. And again, when I was a 4-year-old, my dad telling me good things don't always happen to good people, and you watch certain movies and you go, wow, that ended on such a sad note. Or that's why my favorite Star Wars film is Empire Strikes Back, because it ends on such a sour note. And you're like, oh my God, how are they going to survive all this? But
which is, I mean, that's apropos for the second part of a 3-act story. That's because then the third part is how do we?
And sometimes you don't. I mean, and
exactly
a weird movie that I like to bring up every so often, The First Power with Lou Diamond Phillips. Ooh, it's a good one. He's a cop who basically going after a guy that's supposed to be like the Zodiac killer type, serial killer so he captures him. The guy gets executed, but before he has magic, he basically knows how to get his spirit out of him to go into body. So it's basically like Denzel Washington's Fallen, but 20 years before. And the whole film again, Fallen with a nice dark ending. Yeah, Fallen's
I
great.
do love Fallen. Fallen's great.
Future episode of this podcast, Fallen?
You could probably make a case for it, but I don't think so.
I mean, we've made some pretty tenuous cases on this.
That's kind of like us with Cast of Cthulhu. Like, can we say this is Lovecraftian? Maybe.
We fudge a lot on this podcast. We really do. It basically it's extended to is this based on an existing IP and it didn't get a sequel? We'll count it. Because chances are, if this had done, and that's the thing with Hollywood, if something does remotely well, it's going to get a sequel. So we could, the way Hollywood works, we can extend this pretty far. This premise can last
you
for
look
years.
Even within the Halloween franchise, Halloween 3 deserves that spot because that's what they really wanted the movies to be. And then that did, and again, that movie didn't do bad. They said, "Oh, we want Mike," and then when Michael Myers came back, the movie actually did worse. But yet, people were happy. So whatever you say, but
right. And then they rebooted it 3 more times.
Yeah, this I've seen timeline graphs of the Halloween how there's this one and then this one, and you're like, oh my, don't do that, and just give me.
Yeah, at this point, I'm hoping for a Halloween into the Michaelverse, this movie.
Right.
All
into the Myers-verse.
Yeah.
The Myers
And it's just a bunch of Myers just getting together and like realizing, hey, we're on the same page? Cool, let's go kill a bunch more people. That'd be scary, actually.
Exactly. And then their hub, of course, is the Event Horizon. And we get, Ash Williams and aging Elvis to fight them. It's going to be great.
Go listen to our Event Horizon episodes. What Steven is referencing,
right? If you haven't listened to Brett's pie in the sky ultimate horror crossover pitch from our Event Horizon episode, go check that out because it's fucking wild and I absolutely love every second of it. But yeah, I mean, look, so this movie, and I honestly,
well, so we were talking about the ending of this movie. It had a different ending too.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Let's okay. Yes, Brett. What was the alternate ending for this film? Because I've actually not seen the alternate ending of this film.
It is. Yeah, it's
really?
different.
You did.
I've seen this movie twice. Once on Showtime, once on HBO Max. So,
well, sure.
Never on physical media to actually watch said ending.
It's on YouTube, Steven. So what it is?
Fine, Brett. Fine. I'll watch it when we're done recording.
So basically, I think it ties the movie together a little bit more. He pretty much gives the captured female Darkseeker back to her family, back to her boyfriend, who's basically the alpha, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he chooses to then take her and leave, and they all leave and don't kill him. And then basically they just take Will Smith's character and put him into the same ending.
I mean, and it also kind of touches more upon that, again, like the Vincent Price one, like he's kind of the monster. Like all the test subjects that have been killed over the years. Yeah, what have I actually done?
Yeah.
I actually really haven't done anything in these last few years. I've just killed a bunch of this kind that actually are evolving. And I'm like, and he's de-evolving in his own way.
Yeah, there's a poignant shot in that alternate ending over his shoulder of the wall of dead Darkseekers he's killed over the past 3 years. So I think
it actually, I agree. And actually, doesn't it? Do they get to the Vermont place, or are they still driving? Right, I think they just drive. So it almost
They're
ends
still driving.
Are they going to find it? I kind of like that, and again, I like open endings like that where you go, oh, maybe they don't find something. So again. Yeah. So again, when they announced
for sure
years ago, this is like back when the movie did really well. It made like $500 million. It
did.
But I remember them saying,
great.
But again, this is after the original ending where he blows himself up. They talked about a sequel, but then, of course, then it came, well, they'll probably do a prequel. And I'm like, why would I want to watch that? I want to watch just people getting sick.
Yeah.
And dying.
Right.
You know what? What else do we need to know? They kind of show everything we need to know.
Didn't we say all we needed to say in the first time?
So I go, okay. So it goes, and that never happened. So, to me, a perfect sequel, let's just say his character survived and he's with them, would probably be the Darkseekers that are more evolved, that have become that actually don't necessarily want to fight them anymore. They just kind of want to live their own lives, leave us alone. And it kind of almost feels like it, but we actually kind of got that with the Rise of the Planet of the Apes movies, where the apes want to live on their own, leave us alone, and the humans, you have the good ones and you have the bad ones, and they kind of clash. So you kind of have that already which again, that's a great trilogy, but that's beside the point. Did they really?
They just announced the fourth one?
Of course. Let's make it a quadrilogy now.
It's IP. We if we're not doing anything with the IP, we're actively losing the IP. That is, again, that's the Hollywood machine. Dollar signs in their eyes, and IP is the most valuable.
You're right, and again, it's Warner Brothers, right, that had this. Yeah, right. From 1970, they've had the rights to this movie.
Yeah,
they made Omega Man a year later,
right,
and then didn't do anything. They tried, but for 36 years.
Including the Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think there was going to be a Tom Cruise one.
Yeah. Which again, all of these people, these are like big Hollywood leading men that make sense in this kind of a movie. Like you get a really great star, you put him at the center of your movie, and then you just craft the whole thing around that individual's persona.
Yeah, the fourth Planet of the Apes is called Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Starts production next month and will release in 2024.
Okay. Not a future episode.
That works. No, gosh, no. No, we there's only one Planet of the Apes movie we can cover on this podcast.
Yeah.
And it's
Tim Burton one.
It's the Tim Burton one. So yeah, and it's on the list. We'll get there one day. That's one.
I'd say
when the fourth
one
Planet of the Apes comes out.
There you go. It's on the list. There you go. Stay tuned, listeners. Stay tuned. But yeah, in terms of making a sequel for this, pretty much right after this movie came out, again, because it did so well, people were like, well, let's do a sequel. The director, whose name I legitimately just forgot.
Yeah,
Francis Lawrence. Is that it? Okay. Francis Lawrence said, oh, we'll do a prequel and Will Smith will come back because, everybody loves Will Smith. But of course then begins, as we said, kind of the Will Smith fallow period where he makes like just a few more movies after this and is just done. Like he does this, he does Hancock. I think he does 7 Pounds. And then he's just, you know what? I guess I don't know anymore, and walks away for 4 years and then comes back with, comes back with Men in Black 3. And then the year after that, After Earth, a cameo in Anchorman 2, and Winter's Tale. Like he's not hitting at the same level. He's been gone too long. And so like, I think Will Smith's lack of involvement probably kills that project, at least for now. He gets, they want to do, they want to do maybe like a series or a reboot. Like all of these discussions have happened. 2012, there was talk about Will Smith coming back and doing another one. Mm-hmm. And then most recently, in March of 2022, March 4th, 2022, it was announced that Will Smith and Michael B. Jordan would be, there was a sequel to this movie in development. They would produce and star in a sequel to I Am Legend. That was March 4th, 2022. And then 23 days after that, Will Smith bitch slaps Chris Rock at the Oscars. And as you mentioned, James, like starts getting dropped off of projects, and his kind of public perception kind of starts to tank. So this might be our most tenuous episode yet. Like this might be one of those where like we're kind of walking on pins and needles covering this one, but by the same token, like again, we'll stand by our promise. If the sequel does come out, we'll cover it. James would love to have you back for that if that does happen. But again, Will Smith kind of, I guess we'll wait and see what happens with the Will Smith of it all, going forward, because it doesn't really feel like people are rushing, with the exception perhaps of the Bad Boys films. People are really rushing to make movies with him. Bad Boys for Life, by the way, the #1 film of 2020.
Crazy.
In case you were unaware. Given that it was maybe the last big release before the pandemic, not too surprising, but yeah.
But so we should mention the new segment we should have been doing from the beginning. Did it deserve a sequel?
Which I did not do last week, so my apologies. Throwing myself on your mercy, sir.
Fair enough. That's all right. Look, we're getting used to it. It's a new segment.
It's new.
That we should have been doing from the beginning, but it's fine.
So now that we've talked about what a sequel could have been, might have been, or what they wanted it to be, did it deserve one? James,
I think it's a good one and done. Like, do I need to see more of this story? Not really. I think, let's say with the original ending, not the alternate one, but you have a complete, beginning, middle, and end, and it ends on a high note, and the humanity will live on. What else is there to tell? Like really what? Oh,
exactly. Yeah.
Oh no, like they're back. Of course, they're these things. There's more of these things than anything. So like, of course they're around. It's like again, like The Walking Dead. No matter where you go, there's always going to be zombies. But are they the villains, or is it really the people? And do I want to see that world? Do
Exactly.
I want to see like, oh, the infighting with this like society? Not really. No. Let me end on a note that maybe that's like utopia, and they're living a happy life now. I don't need to see that. So no, the movie did well. Leave it at that.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with you. The original novel didn't have a follow up. It didn't need one. Like, this feels like a very contained story. Every other adaptation of this story has been relatively self-contained. I think the reason we don't get the dour ending is because of the Will Smith of it all. Like, he kind of, in this phase, he's in his Rock era. Like, you know, we've talked about The Rock on this podcast about how he kind of can't go outside of his persona. And that seems to be the zone that Will Smith is in here. Like, you can't question Will Smith's heroicism. And so we get that really great ending. Anything that brings him back into the equation, I think, cheapens that ending. So, you know, we have the ending we have. There's the alternate that's out there. It exists. And it seems like any future version of this is probably going to play off of that ending and pretend like it was the one that got released all along. But no, like, there's a, I think this is good on its own as a standalone. I don't think this needed one. Yes, it did make all the money, so Hollywood gets very greedy, as it is wont to do. But I think this is a good one. Brett?
Yeah, I agree. The only thing is you might want to see a sequel to see the more closer to the book vampires. That's it. Otherwise, we don't.
At that point, just do a reboot, really.
Yeah, honestly, just do a reboot at that point. We don't need a sequel.
We've had 3 versions of this story already. What's a 4th? I mean, how many Star is Borns have there been? Come on, we can
at least 10.
Right.
How many Batmans have there been?
At least 45.
Yeah, so we're okay with another I Am Legend. That's okay. We can do that again. And you know what? Cast Michael B. Jordan. He's fucking great. I love that guy. More stuff with Michael B. Jordan. Honestly, his cameo in the new Space Jam movie,
only
best
only
part
good
of that
part
damn
about that
movie.
Yeah.
Honestly,
the bar was low there.
Let's touche, very low. I also like the part where the Gremlins were on screen for half a second.
Or the weird random,
Gremlins,
you have rated R characters within, like what? Or the mask. The mask is chilling.
Yeah, you've got the Droogs from.
Oh, that's a great IP to
Orange
have for the
out.
kids,
Right, for the kids. For kids. Yeah. So this movie opens in December of 2007. Just December 14th. Just a very nice, Christmas time movie. A very good, uplifting, kind of feel good sort of film to end up.
Hold on. Is I Am Legend a Christmas movie?
I'm trying to think.
It could be.
The pandemic of this movie takes place around Christmas. There's Christmas decorations and the
my presents are in the closet.
Mentions.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't want to answer. We go in August. It's Christmas now. So there you go. I Am Legend. It's a Christmas movie.
Hell yeah.
This movie opens number 1 on December 14th, 2007. Makes $100 million opening weekend. Like, just an absolute slam dunk opening weekend. It's opens at number 1. Number 2, another movie opening this weekend, opens to just over half of what this one makes. It's Alvin and the Chipmunks. In number 3, I've said it so many times on this episode. Get ready. I'm getting ready to say it again. Future episode of this podcast.
Golden Compass. I love those stories. So that's
that one opened at number 2, or that one opened the week before at number 1, is down to number 3 in its second weekend. That one has not earned as much total in 2 weekends as Alvin and the Chipmunks grossed in 1. So no wonder why we're going to be covering that one. In 4th place, no longer a future episode of this podcast, the Disney film Enchanted, because that one's getting a straight to Disney Plus sequel coming out later this year. And in 5th place, the eventual Academy Award winner, No Country for Old Men, which fucking great movie. That one's made about 35 in the past 6 weeks. Closing out our top 10, you've got Fred Claus, What If Vince Vaughn Was Santa? In 7th place, This Christmas, as opposed to Last Christmas, I guess. In 8th place, The Perfect Holiday. These movies that just kind of hang out because it's Christmas time. In ninth place, we have August Rush. What if there was a rush on August? No, that's the movie about the violin playing kid, right? And then in 10th place, eventual Academy Award nominee Atonement, which is another movie that's fucking great. This movie goes on to gross $256.4 million at the domestic box office, another 329 overseas, for a worldwide box office of $585.5 million.
Is this the highest grossing movie we've ever covered?
It's got to be one. It's got to be in the top 3 of the highest grossing films we've ever covered.
I know
that is insane. I didn't know it did that well.
Usually the movies we
which
cover
is a reason why they don't get a
well.
sequel. But that's why this one's so weird,
right? But and I think if we can point to a reason why this one didn't get a sequel, it's 100%. The Will Smith thing. Like, because right after this, it's two in the bank and he's done. Like he drops out. Like he does stuff with his kids. He maybe bummed that he, lost out on the Oscar nomination for 7 pounds. I'm not entirely sure the story there, but he just falls off the face of the earth for 4 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's on the bingo card. Like, doesn't get a sequel because the main one or more actors just didn't want to do it.
Yeah,
that's on the disenfranchised bingo card. It is. I don't
know that it's him not wanting to do it. So, because I think if the script had been better, if they had a decent idea, he might have. But yeah, you're right. It is on the bingo card. Like it's one of the ones that we can tick off. Has anyone gotten to bingo yet? Let us know. Disenfranchised.
Let us know.
Who's going to make that bingo card for us too, by the way? I'd love to see it. But yeah, I mean, it is. It's one of those things that does come up from time to time. Just, the main star not interested, not invested. And it seems like at this point in his career, Will Smith might be willing to return to some. He's kind of Harrison Fording his career right now. He did Bad Boys for Life. He bowed out of Independence Day resurgence. But I think, if that film had been in development, maybe even just a few years later, he might have had something to do with it. And now he's allegedly returning to the I Am Legend wheelhouse. Like, maybe this is just, he's already done the Men in Black thing back in 2012. Maybe he'll do that again. Because again, that's IP. Warner Brothers isn't going to let that die. We have that truly awful Men in Black International movie that came out.
What about I, Robot 2?
If we can get a movie that stars Will Smith and Chris Hemsworth, I'm sure people will show up.
I mean, there's a lot he can work with if he really wants to.
Yeah. Do we want him to is the question. And maybe, I don't know. The answer now is, I don't know.
Honestly, a sequel to Wild Wild West would just make my dreams come true.
You would. Well, the bad thing about a sequel to Wild Wild West, Brett, is that we wouldn't be able to cover it on this podcast. And I know you really want that to happen.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
I don't know. Which one I want more.
Maybe.
I really know.
Well, here's the thing.
That movie's so bad, but I love it.
Maybe that'll be the reason why the sequel gets made, because people are like, oh, they're talking about the movie.
Right.
I think you overestimate how many people listen to this podcast, James. And believe me, no one appreciates that more than I do. But yeah, so that is our episode on I Am Legend. And we have, of course, been so grateful to have been joined by the great James McCormick. James, tell us where we can find you on socials. Tell us what you guys have going on over at Cast of Cthulhu.
Yeah, I mean, on Twitter, just really,
lay it on us,
where I'm trying to rebuild my quote unquote, followers again. Wonka Kills Kids there now. Fistful of Meat has been dead for a long time now. Yeah, RIP for still a reason I do not know. Recently on the Cast of Cthulhu, actually the newest episode is one that Jim and I are actually not on. We had a special friend of the show, Jerry Smith, composer extraordinaire, do an interview with the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival co-director Gwen Callahan, talking about the festival that's actually going on this weekend right now. And it was a fun little episode.
Nice.
And in the last the last month or so, we've covered the glory hole Lovecraftian film Glorious. Yeah, it's on Xitter, a Xitter exclusive with Rebecca McKendry from Fangoria fame, and whatever that horror podcast she used to do that got shut down because of one of the co-hosts being a creep. Not her. She was great, but something else happened. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, and then we also covered The Ritual, which is a favorite of ours. Really?
That was a film I did not
I
care
can understand
for.
that, but I mean,
might have
I
to
think of it
revisit
as
original.
the male version of The Descent. You know what I mean?
That makes that
Plus,
does make a lot of sense. Yeah, in that
Oh,
context, yeah. I think
so
The
do I.
Descent
So
is
do I. And again, that's
better
The
done,
Descent
but-
is a film I actually kind of want to cover on the podcast. I think I have a line to say it's Lovecraftian, and that's the thing. 100%.
Can I be on that episode,
and that's
please?
another film with two endings.
Yeah, let's get 3 guys together, or Brett, you can join us too. Let's get 4 guys together to talk about a female-fronted horror movie. That sounds like a great.
No,
plan. I love
we won't
that
get
idea.
canceled.
That won't
That's
be
okay.
problematic at all.
But
Nope.
other than that, I mean, soon we're still trying to do maybe 1 or 2 more episodes before Jim has his baby. So it's coming soon, coming in the next month or so. Little Cthulhu to the world is going to be entering. Yeah, but and we'll take a little hiatus until next year and then start anew. But other than that, really, Twitter's really the place to find me. Other than that,
Right on. Well, we always love having you on.
Yes.
We always love having Jim on too. Jim was supposed to join us, and scheduling, just the bane of our collective existence, just didn't quite work out, unfortunately. But we'd love to do a proper Cast of Cthulhu disenfranchised crossover one of these days. We're gonna make it happen.
We'll figure it out. I'm still trying to think which film
promise.
we could do, but we'll figure it out.
There's a couple. There's one in particular that's back on the table. But you've already
we
covered
could
it, so I don't know if you'd want to
probably,
do it again. But
yeah.
We'll talk about it after we record. But at any rate, this is
Steven, what were the Metacritic and Letterboxd ratings?
Oh my gosh!
What are you doing, my guy?
That's my whole shtick, and I completely abandoned my shtick. Fuck, you're right. I'm sorry. The tomatometer score on this one is a 68%. Critics' consensus. I Am Legend overcomes questionable special effects and succeeds largely on the strength of Will Smith's mesmerizing performance. We more or less agree. The Metascore on this one is a 65 based on generally favorable reviews from 37 critics. And the Letterboxd score is a 3.3. James, as our guest, who you've already, given your plugs, but as our guest, what is out of 5 stars? What
out
is
of 5
your rating
stars
for?
I give it 3.5. Yeah,
3.5. Brett,
that's what I would give it as well. I think it's a 4.5 until
exactly.
That point where the dog dies.
I agree.
After that, kills like a whole star.
Okay.
3.5.
it's a 3 for me. Which again, better than it was. Like the last few films that I've watched, just for my own edification and for other podcasts, they've grown slightly in my estimation, and this is one of them. Like, I didn't care for this one at all when I first saw it. Kind of bored me, honestly, but this time through, it was, again, I picked up a lot more on what Will Smith was doing, and I got an appreciation for the guy does have acting chops, even if he doesn't often employ them. So
yeah, he plays psychologically fucked up with PTSD very well.
Right. James, since you've already done your plugs, where can we find Cast of Cthulhu on?
Let's see. Well, I mean, you can email us, email us at mountainsofmadness@gmail.com if you have any suggestions or, hate mail, whatever. We'll take it. I know. You'd be surprised.
No, don't send them hate mail. They're good guys.
We haven't gotten really that much. I got more hate mail when I was with
maybe not
Criterion Cast, because there's nothing worse than pissing off nerds. Nothing worse. Yeah.
You're telling me.
You're not a kid, brother.
We have a whole episode dedicated to
imagine
shitting on Star Wars fans. So,
and then a whole episode dedicated to shitting on Marvel fans.
Right. We do this a lot. Shitting on Ghostbusters fans.
Well, there was one episode I didn't do. It was The Night Porter, which is the Nazi, artistic Nazi film, and we actually had a bunch of neo-Nazis threatening our lives, for not liking the film. But and funny enough, I didn't actually. That was one episode I could not do, and I'm like, wow, the one episode I don't do, we had death threats. God damn it. The closest I ever got to that was doing a review for The English Patient, which I thought was one of the most boring films ever. And I had so-and-so basically said, if it's so boring, then why are you born? Or something like that. I'm like, what does that even mean? And then, and the funny enough, I didn't actually. That was one of the most boring films ever. And I had so-and-so basically said, if it's so boring, then why are you born? Or something like that. I'm like, what does that even mean? So that was the insult I got. That and trashing Tron Legacy, which since then I actually like a lot more now. But when it came out, I trashed it, except for the soundtrack, which is still amazing. And I had someone not believe that I watched the film because there's no way the film sucks. Okay, you haven't seen it either, so shut the fuck up. But on Twitter, on Twitter you can cast Cthulhu. If you don't know how to spell Cthulhu, Google will figure it out for you, so don't worry. But
and it's not that hard. Honestly, my phone autocorrects whenever I misspell Cthulhu.
It knows now. So. It's become that sentient that Cthulhu is in everywhere now. But yeah, other than that, we don't really use the Facebook page, so I'm not going to plug that. So, I don't even use Facebook much anymore. So, other than that, that's really about it for the podcast. But if you Google us and, on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher Radio or any of those fun places you can listen to us. We're actually on Spotify now. So you just want to just stream us on Spotify. I've actually had some people that only use Spotify actually start listening to the podcast. So that's actually a good little avenue that people do not know how to download podcasts, especially family members of mine that are over the age of 60. But they know how to use Spotify, which I'm amazed by. So, hey, whatever gets the ears.
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure. Whatever works. Spotify is a very intuitive interface.
100%.
It's one of the best things about Spotify. But yeah, no, we also, you can find us on Spotify as well. In fact, this has been the Disenfranchised Podcast. So shoot us an email, disenfranchisepod@gmail.com. Let us know how we're doing. If you have any questions for us, did this conversation spark any questions? Let us know. disenfranchisepod@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on all the social medias. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Facebook @disenfranchisepod. Look, if you want to help us out, we always appreciate it. Swing on by Apple Podcasts, swing on over on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a nice, juicy 5-star rating and review. We always appreciate it because that's going to help us find more people like yourselves. And damn it if we don't think you're pretty cool. So bring your friends. You can also support us monetarily if you so desire. Swing on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/disenfranchisepod, where we've got stuff happening. There's stuff's going on. I'm not sure what it is yet, but we're gonna release some stuff. I'm sure. So
we got some back catalog stuff you can listen to while we figure that out.
That's true. We actually do have, including several episodes of revolving around horror films. We've got our commentary track for Train to Busan up there at the $5 level. We've got episodes on the Scream franchise and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise on unenfranchised at the $5 level. A couple of spooky themed disenfranchised episodes at the $3 level for top 5 lists that Brett and I did last year. There's some spooky season content behind that paywall to satisfy even the most glib of horror fans. So swing on over there if you want to throw us a few bucks. We sure would appreciate it. And yeah, that's the episode. You can find me, your host, Stephen Foxworthy, on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd @ChewyWalrus. Brett, where can we find you, sir?
You can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd @sus_warlock.
So that is all she wrote. This has been the I Am Legend episode of the Disenfranchised Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Foxworthy. For my co-host, Brett Wright, and our very special guest, James McCormick, be they vampires, be they zombies, either way, stay the fuck away.